Since getting the Sony FX3, I've been getting this one question asked over and over again, and that is, hey Alex, how do you expose your shots for SLOG 3? People keep saying how great my footage looks and how they can't ever get anything close to that when shooting in SLOG 3 on their FX3 or even their A7S III. So today, I'm going to show you exactly how to set everything up to film and expose for SLOG 3 on your FX3 or A7S III. Now, before I properly go over how exactly I expose my images for shooting in SLOG 3, I'm just going to go through a quick rundown of these settings on my camera. And if you have an A7S III instead of an FX3, you can totally follow along because they're basically the same thing. Okay, so first things first, we're going to go to the first menu, then choose image quality, file format, and XAVC S4K. Then we'll go to movie settings, recording frame rate, and 24p. Then record settings, and choose 100M 422 10-bit. Then we go to shooting, image stabilization, steady shot, and select standard, then select focal length and set it to whatever lens you are currently using. Then let's go on over to the second menu, then choose metering mode, and set it to multi. And then for face priority in multi, set it to on. Spot metering point, choose center. And then we can go back on out to white balance and set it to 5500 Kelvin unless you need to change it for a specific look. Then let's go on over to color tone, picture profile, and choose PP8. And then if we go further into that, we can change the settings so we can choose the black level of 0, gamma to SLOG 3, black gamma range middle, level 0, knee mode set to auto, color mode is sgamut3.cine, saturation to 0, color phase to 0, and if you're going into color depth, you can set it to 0 for all of them under R, G, B, C, M, and Y. Let's go back to detail level and set it to -7, adjust mode is auto, VH balance is 0, BW balance type 3, limit 7, crispening 0, and highlight detail 0. Then, if we want to choose our main shooting settings, we can set it to 24 frames per second. We'll do 1/50th the shutter speed, or just keep in mind the 180-degree rule. You can set your f-stop to whatever you want, and you should set it to an ISO of either 640 or 12,800, keeping in mind it's best to use either of the cameras to dual native ISOs. Alright, and now before we move on to go over exactly how I go about exposing for SLOG 3, I just want to take a moment to talk about today's sponsor, and that is Skillshare. If you're anything like me, you like learning things online, on your own, and at your own pace. I've always been like this, and I've actually learned everything I know about photography and filmmaking by finding great online resources. And that's when I came across Skillshare, an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for anyone who loves learning and wants to explore their creativity and learn new skills. With Skillshare, I've been able to continue to hone my craft by checking out a variety of great classes from some amazingly talented people that cover a wide variety of topics, like photography, cinematography, lighting breakdowns, and so much more. If you have a specific skill you're trying to learn, or even if you want to dive deeper to expand your current skills, Skillshare is absolutely worthwhile to check out. So, if you're interested in upping your skills and want to take advantage of this awesome deal, the first 1,000 people to click the link below or use my code AlexPerri will get 1 month free when you join and become a member. You'll have access to absolutely everything on Skillshare in that month, so make sure to take advantage of this. Alright, and now it's time to go over exactly how I expose my shots for SLOG 3. So, I'm sure you've heard a lot of different things about exposing for SLOG 3 before, and I'm sure a lot of it has come from maybe the times of some older cameras that maybe handle things a little bit differently. So I've always personally heard that you have to overexpose when you're shooting in SLOG 3 by 1.7 to 2 stops. So on the back of your camera, you will see this little meter, and it's got a plus or minus and a number. So the number beside that will be how much you're either overexposing or underexposing. So if it's a plus and a number, that's overexposing, and if it's a minus and a number, it's underexposing. So apparently that sweet spot was supposed to be between 1.7 and 2. So if you go over 2, you'll actually see the number blinking. So if you hit 2 and you're not overexposed yet, you won't see it blinking, and that's perfectly fine. But if that 2 starts blinking, that's when you know you're actually overexposed, and it's probably more than the 2 stops. So that's not a good place to be because you'll be too far overexposed. You're gonna lose too much detail in the highlights and maybe even some of the midtones. So I've actually played around with this quite a bit, and I have tried multiple different things. So I've tried just doing a standard exposure where it's just even at 0. I've tried overexposing it by 1 stop, by 1.7, by 2, and even further than that. So I had a lot of different information to look at here and lots of different things to play with to see what actually worked best. So if you look at a lot of the footage over here, I did typically overexpose this. So it does look quite bright and washed out. But then when I convert to Rec 709 and bring the exposure down, everything looks fantastic, and it did retain the detail in those highlights and midtones. And I did find if I did push it too far, I did start losing detail and it didn't really look as good, and it was much harder to bring that exposure down to normal levels. And if you wanted to kind of make your shot more underexposed in post, it would be a lot harder to get there or get to the right place if you overexpose by too much. But interestingly, I actually found that if I did a normal exposure, so not overexposing it and not underexposing it, I actually found I had great results with this as well. So I didn't really notice too much of a difference between overexposing it and doing a normal exposure. So I think that just might be something to do with the new sensors on the FX3 and the A7S III, where you don't have to necessarily overexpose it like that. It's just probably much more forgiving, but the key takeaway here is to be shooting everything with the proper settings. So that will also include shooting with the correct ISO. So the FX3 and the A7S III actually have dual native ISO, and that is 640 and 12,800. So if you shoot at either of those two ISOs, you will have beautiful, clean footage. It won't be super grainy or noisy. Now, if you shoot at other high ISOs, you will actually see quite a bit of noise here. So if you look at this example right over here, this was a night shot and it was quite dark. So I upped the ISO to bring up my exposure, but I didn't go exactly to the correct ISO. I didn't go all the way to 12,800. I think I went to something around 12,000, and this footage was quite grainy and didn't look the nicest. So it took a lot of finessing in post to get the overall image to look nice, and I wasn't 100% happy with it because it was a silly mistake. I would have had perfectly clean footage if I'd shot at 12,800 ISO for that. So those are things to keep in mind when you're shooting an SLOG3 and just shooting in general. You want to make sure you're shooting in the camera's native ISO because you will get the best results that way. Another thing I would say is you will also not have great success if you underexpose too much. There definitely is still a bit of wiggle room there, so if you do underexpose, you'll be able to bring some of that exposure back in post, but I think there's absolutely less room for error there, and there's just less overall detail captured when you underexpose like that. So if you're going to do something under or over, go over and keep it in that range of 1.7 to 2, but I really think you'll have great success if you just expose correctly all the way through to about 2. Well, there you have it. That is how I expose my images for SLOG3, and I hope you learned something good here. Hope you learned something new, and I hope you're able to just take what you learned here and shoot some awesome images for yourself. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you in the next one.